Oh, yeah. That's it. Serious wind slab. We already got some new snow here, but we've got like pencil hardness wind slab here. And it's breaking on a layer of facets about, oh, you can just see it there, just junk. It's about 2 to 3 inches thick. And there's a problem. Here's the ECT, and we pulled that off. So, you know, this is a weak layer we're worried about. It's just junk under there. And we've got this hard slab sitting on top of it. And what that does is, I mean, we can put hundreds of skiers down this slope, and we're never going to impact that weak layer. That weak layer is going to be with us for a really, really long time. And what we got to worry about then is if we put another big load, no matter how much skier compaction we get on here, we could still get a fracture to come right through there on the slope.
So that was December 17th. And I'm somewhat sarcastic. I'm known for that. And right after we filmed that, I went to Carl, I looked at Carl, and I said, Carl, I said, this is going to be the video we're going to be showing everyone when a huge slide happens on Saddle in another month or two. And here we are. But luckily no one died. So we knew there was a problem. We kept going back to Saddle to keep looking at it, seeing how it's doing. This was a snow pit that was dug on the 31st. Once again, the point here is more just our scores. I'm pointing out that our scores here aren't much different. So we were a little surprised with that. Here we went back 2 weeks later. Things are still not great. The facets are not bonding. They're still staying pretty weak. So on the beginning of January, on January 5th, we got, I think it was like, got a few feet of snow all over southwest Montana. And the Avalanche Center put out an avalanche warning from everywhere from the Bridgers down the Cook City to West Yellowstone. It was the first time in the history of the Avalanche Center that we had a warning over our entire advisory area. It was so unstable, it was high danger, which means avalanches are likely, that people were able to trigger slides. Here's a snowmobile, this is in the Bridgers. You can trigger huge slides from down low on the slope. So this was highly unstable, and so once again we're loading things up. We've got this. We had an avalanche warning on January 12th. We're getting a little more snow, and we can see here there's this 1, 2, and 3. Or you can make them out. These are 3 slab avalanches that happened. This is Saddle Peak right here. This X is where we dug our snow pit on the 17th and again on the 31st. And so, you know, we're seeing some activity here, and so we're still quite concerned because nothing large has pulled out. Avalanches continued, meaning that it was almost every day. We'd come to the office, and almost every day we were getting an email or a photo or a voice message saying, oh, I triggered a slide, or oh, I saw a slide here. So even though there wasn't snowing a ton, it was snowing enough, and the snow was weak enough that we were seeing a lot, or we were seeing consistent activity all through January into the beginning of February. This was up by Ross Pass. And what we're pointing out here is shallow areas in the snowpack. Where the snowpack is thin, it's typically easier to trigger avalanches there if there's a weak layer, because you can affect it, your body weight, you can affect it, the weak layer, a lot easier where it's thinner. Avalanches are continuing in February. This is Bridger Peak. And so here we are, we're about a week before the big storm that rips out Saddle. And here's a snowboarder, and what's happening here is he's skiing down. This is actually an action photo because he's skiing, and as he's skiing, he triggered this. And this is, if it was a movie, we'd be watching him ride this slab out to the side while it moves downhill. So this just gives an idea of some of the instability that we were seeing in the mountains prior to the big storm. So on February 13th, it started to snow. And that was a, let's see, 16, 15, 14. 13th was a, I think it started actually on the 12th, which was a Friday. So Friday, Saturday, started I think late Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we got a lot of snow. 3 inches of water in 48 hours. We'll discuss what that means. When we talk about inches of water, we're talking about, it's called snow water equivalency, which is SWE, which is how much does the snow actually weigh, because that's what we're most interested in. So this 3 inches of water equated into 24 inches of dense snow. And we also had some west winds while it fell. So how much weight is added to the snowpack is really important, because if we have 3 feet, if I tell you, hey, we got 3 feet of snow in the Bridgers. Well, as an avalanche forecaster, I'm like, well, I mean, that's kind of a decent piece of information, but I want to know, what does that 3 feet of snow weigh? Because 3 feet of cold smoke powder might only be an inch of water, or less than an inch of water if it's really low density snow. But what we got is we got some wet, heavier snow, and so it just stresses the weak layer out because the snowpack needs time to adjust. So because of that, we need to consider the rate at which this weight has been added. So if we add 3 feet of snow over the period of a week, that's good. And the reason that's good is the snowpack literally has time to adjust to the load. Think that it needs time. With time, the snowpack literally can adjust and it becomes less hair trigger. When we can add 3 feet overnight or in 48 hours, that's a lot of snow, a lot of stress being added in a very short time. That's when we see natural activity. That's when we also see human-triggered activity. So here it is. It snowed 3 feet, or 2 feet of snow, 3 inches of water. What happens? Well, the sky's clear a little, and all of a sudden we start getting all these reports where people were out skiing, they're out snowmobiling, they're like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what I just saw. I'm seeing big slides that have gone to the ground. They're deep slab slides are happening in all over the Bridger Range. This is one of the crowns here by Ross Pass. They're quite large, and so we're concerned because it's now breaking deep. There's been enough load added that things are now breaking on that layer that was formed back in December. This is a shot of Saddle Peak, the day of the avalanche. Now the avalanche happened at 11 in the morning, and on Monday, it was on a Tuesday is when the avalanche happened. On Monday, the skies were clear. It was a nice sunny day. Bridger opened up the Schlossman's lift for the first time since the storm. Skiers went up, they rode the lift, and they hiked the ridge. This is all on Monday. And they laid tracks like you wouldn't believe. These are all tracks from Monday. Hundreds of tracks in there, all down the slope. Skier went up. A few people had skied this before that day on Tuesday morning. But a skier went up top and went towards the edge. The cornice broke a cornice. Cornice is just a big overhanging chunk of heavy snow. It probably weighed 1,000, 2,000 pounds. I don't know. It was the size of a VW van. And it hit the slope. You can see the slide mark right here. It hit, and instead of tumbling, it slid, and it slid down. So here's a few thousand pounds. You talk about a rapid load. You got 2,000 pounds sliding down the hill. It hit a weak zone. It hit a zone on the slope. It hit an area of the slope where it could affect that weak layer. And typically, those are found by rock bands. And sure enough, right where the rock band starts here, it hits, and that's where it fractures. Well, when it fractured, it went big. It didn't go enormous, but it went pretty big. It's about 1,000 feet across. This right here was anywhere from 4 to 6 feet deep, and took out the whole side of Saddle. This is it looking from down low. This is where it pulled out. This is where it didn't. This is called the football field. This did not slide. This was intact. We've got some video clips here we'll show in a sec. This is looking from the top down. And what I want to point out here is that this is called the run-out zone. This is where all the debris ends up, down at the bottom of the hill, a few thousand feet below us. The debris from this slide came right about here. That was the extent of the debris. When this thing runs big, and I've got a few slides here, a few shots coming up of what it looks like. When this thing goes big, meaning it's 10 feet deep, it pulls out the whole peak. The debris will come all the way down into here. This is the extent of how big it can actually go. And it'll rip out trees, and it's absolutely enormous. So although this was a big slide, it was not near as big as it could have been. So here's a video from a guy who had a helmet cam on, a snowboarder who was on the slope when it pulled. So you can see people hiking up. Yeah. He's like, well, I guess it's okay to go. Look at all those people coming up. Pretty nice. Feeling good. He's calling for his partner. So it broke up above him, and he's trying to get off to the side.
Holy shit! Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
So when he came down, it triggered behind him. He didn't trigger it, but he was on the slope, managed to get off to the side. So he was thinking to get off to the side, and then he immediately pulls out his beacon, and he's going to have to go into rescue mode because he doesn't know where his partner is. This was a shot taken from the summit right after it released. Let's look at that powder cloud. And then we've got one taken from the lift at Bridger Bowl of the powder cloud. Look at that thing.
Wow.
Look out!
So there's the crown. There's a picture of the powder cloud there as it came down. Now, when this happened, there was no one that was confirmed missing. Everyone knew where their partners were, but you're never sure. I mean, you're never sure if there was someone, maybe a team got swept away, you know, or maybe both partners got swept away, or maybe, you know, there was someone down in the bottom who got hit. So Bridger Bowl immediately responded after this and sent patrollers over into the bottom to kind of find out how bad it was, were there people missing. The people at the top did a good job because there was a lot of people on the summit. They put their transceivers on the receive. They all took different ways down, and they were doing beacon searches on the debris to try and find out if there was anyone buried. Now, Bridger has a policy which really came into play here to help us out, which is anyone that rides the Sloshman's lift has a transceiver. So we know that chances are there's some, you know, if someone was buried, they are beeping. They have a transceiver on, provided it wasn't damaged in the fall or they didn't turn it off on the, you know, when they got off the lift. So the odds are good that if someone's buried, we might find them. We probably won't find them alive with a big slide like this, but we'll at least find them. And also, they run the lift when they have good visibility. Because trying to do any sort of rescue, trying to do anything out here if there's no visibility, if the cloud level was really down low, is incredibly dangerous because we don't know what's happening up above us, especially in a situation like this where only half of Saddle Peak slid. So Gallatin County got the call, search and rescue. They sent out a page. Search and rescue responded. Search and rescue plus the Avalanche Center plus Bridger Bowl were all working together to clear the debris, to find out if there was anyone buried, and to try and make it safe. Luckily, no one was caught. We also knew that we'd probably have to wait through the night to find out if anyone was reported missing. So this is down at the bottom in the debris. This is looking up. And you can't see, the avalanche came out of this gully here. This area over on the side, this is underneath what's called the football field, and that had not slid. This is also looking up from below on those cliffs. Avalanches this size are not survivable, especially when they're taking you over cliffs. I bring up this picture again because you can see here, it's a phenomenal picture, but this whole area had not avalanched. And we were underneath it doing beacon searches. We had avalanche dogs out doing searches. And on Tuesday, it was getting windy. And so this area here was getting loaded with more and more snow. And so as rescuers down in the bottom, we were getting concerned that either a cornice could fall and trigger the slope again, or just the weight of all the new wind-loaded snow could add enough stress to the snowpack and create an avalanche. So after doing some preliminary searches, we ended up pulling everyone off, and you know, because it was just too dangerous to be there. This is a picture from Lonnie Ball taken in March 1980, St. Patrick's Day. This is how big it can go. If we look here, the avalanche goes from this side all the way over and it comes out all the way over here. This is full track. This is how big it can go. And that's where it will go all the way down to the bottom. It'll rip out full-grown trees. It's a maximum size avalanche. So they can be huge. Luckily for us, you know, this section did not go. So this is looking a close-up now at that same avalanche from 1980. The crown depth here was recorded at 18 feet deep. So it was huge. When we look at the weather that led up to this storm, there was less water fell, less snow water equivalency fell than we had even in the storm from a few weeks ago. On February 2007, the Bridgers experienced quite a large avalanche cycle. And that one, look at it almost mirrors it exactly. It's really quite similar right here. What happened on 07 and also again in 010. So people tend to think, you know, you have human history, and maybe you've lived in Bozeman for 5-6 years, and you think, oh man, I ski saddle all the time. I get my Bridger pass, I go up there, or I hike up there. I know this area. It doesn't slide. I mean, I've never seen it slide. I'm telling you, this stuff slides. You know, we now know, everyone in this room knows if you've gone up to Bridger, you see that crown, but the key point is to not forget that. You don't want to forget it in 2-3 years from now and go, well, I've never seen it go big. I mean, it never goes fully wall to wall. Well, in 1980 it did, and it will again too. So you just have to keep that in mind. This is a shot of the crown the day of the avalanche there. And this is a video that was made the day after, because Carl Birkland and Mark Staples went back up there. They dug in the crown, looked at the snow, and kind of analyzed what was happening.
We're up here at the fracture line on Saddle Peak, and just taking a look at the different layers, and it looks like the avalanche probably ran on the faceted snow that was buried back in December. So we've got this old snow. It's pretty hard, but still faceted, and right in here, a weaker layer of facets. It's quite a bit stronger than it was in December, but we loaded it with so much snow. Right above that, if you remember, we capped it with a hard slab, and that protected that weak layer from any skier compaction. There was no way that skiers were going to impact that layer. That layer stayed there this whole season, and remember we talked about if we put a lot of snow on it, and we've got 2 inches of water from an earlier storm, and then this last storm, 3 inches of water, 5 inches of water. We loaded on top of that thing, and that was enough to overload this slope and get it in condition that when the cornice hit the slope, the whole thing fractured.
So there you have it. So we're going to go over some common questions that people have been asking and we've been talking about and discussing amongst ourselves and amongst our friends. And, you know, and one of the questions that comes up is, you know, do ski tracks indicate stability? Well, clearly the answer is no, because we know that ski tracks, just the tracks themselves, because someone's been there before, doesn't mean the slope is stable, because that avalanche pulled out a whole bunch of tracks. Now, there is, if we have a weak layer on the surface, ski tracks can break up that weak layer. However, I've investigated, God, lots and lots of avalanches. And there are many times when I've gone to an avalanche after it's broken, and I'm standing on the bed surface, that's the smooth surface that everything slid on, and I'm standing there, and there are ski tracks in the bed surface. So what that's telling me is that even if you put some ski tracks on a bed surface through a weak layer, it doesn't always mean that you've chopped it up and it's no longer a problem. So ski tracks are not an indicator of stability. And we see this really clearly in this photo because all these tracks are now gone. What about skier compaction? You know, Carl talked about that in the video, but once again, these skiers the weight of those ski, or the the skis don't sink down enough to chop up and really affect that layer. So although skier compaction, especially in a heavily traveled area, could help if it's near, where the skis are sinking in, once we've buried it, once it's buried, especially once it's capped with a hard wind slab, that happens a lot on saddle, all bets are off. You're not affecting it. It's staying for a long, long time, and that's exactly what happened. And then when we talk about Saddle Peak, people tend to think of it as though it's part of the ski area, and it's not. It's the backcountry. And there are huge sections in the backcountry that don't get tracked. And so you can't assume, even if you're like, oh man, there's lots of tracks here, not every square inch of this. Here you have the starting zone right up near the top, which doesn't have any tracks in it. If you got a snowstorm the next night and covered all these tracks, you wouldn't know. You just wouldn't know where they were. So ski tracks do not indicate stability. We can't, it's in the backcountry. We're not there every day. Another thing to remember too is with skier compaction or ski tracks, during the storm, if a storm lasts 2-3 days, there's no one there putting tracks in. You got to wait for the lift to open, or so whole days go by, a week can go by before anyone's out there. So we can bury weak layers very quickly that then get buried so deep the skis won't affect it. So let's talk for a second about safe zones on Saddle Peak, because people will always talk about, well, I ski saddle all the time, I know it really well, I ski safely, we ski in safe zones. Now, this shot here was taken the day after the avalanche. This rib that they're on is actually considered a safe zone, but you can see standing next to some big chunks. I mean, part of this did rip out. The key, I think, in my mind, when we talk about a safe zone, what I think of as a safe zone is that I'm standing somewhere on the hill, on the slope, and if, God forbid, the avalanche happened, it's going to go around me. It's going to be like Moses in the Red Sea, it's just going to part around me. That's a safe zone. Saddle Peak, as we saw in that Lonnie Ball photograph from 1980, there are no true safe zones on Saddle Peak. Now, having said that, there are safer zones. Not every avalanche on Saddle Peak rips wall to wall. There can be safer zones where, you can be on this ridge right here, which is a common area for people to come down, because sometimes there might be smaller slides off there where they're not connected, and it's definitely safer than being out in the center. But the point here is that don't kid yourself into thinking that there are safe zones, completely safe zones on saddle, because they don't exist. So that means avalanches are all about timing. And so you want to hedge your bets. If you're going to go to saddle, you want to go there when the chances of triggering a slide are at a minimum. I'm going to talk for a second about 3 important concepts here: triggers, initiation, and propagation. Triggers. When you go out there, you don't even need to go out there. You can be riding the lift and you look out at saddle, and what do you see? You see dozens of people all over the place. Every one of those people are a possible trigger. We use the term side country to describe basically the backcountry next to a ski area, because when you're in the deep backcountry, it's typically you and your partner. You're out there, you're skiing one at a time, which we like doing because then we're only exposing one at a time in case something goes wrong. But in the side country situation next to the ski area, you're on a slope, but there might be people over here. People are dropping in above you. It's a little bit of chaos out there. You're not in control because there's a lot of people coming in up above. Skiers are definitely a trigger out there. There's also, all along this ridge, there are cornices. And just like it happened when that guy walked a little too close and triggered this cornice, that also can happen. In some ways, him triggering that slide with that cornice saved a lot of lives. Because if that avalanche had happened the day before, could have killed dozens of people. Could have happened a few hours later when there was 10 or 15 people on the slope and could have killed them. So in a way, it definitely, I think, the timing was amazing, and because it's now gone, he definitely ended up saving some lives there. With triggers, people tend to think, hey, what triggered that slope was a 2,000-pound cornice. There were tracks in it from the day before. Clearly skiers don't, you know, they can't trigger it. It's got to be something big. Well, that's not true. Because how it works is when a cornice falls, something big falls. It's kind of like a shotgun. It's huge. It's just a big load. You know, we added stress really quickly. It doesn't necessarily have to find the weakest part of the slope. It's just so big, it just, you know, has the potential to take something out. A skier, if the skier hits the precise, weakest, thinnest part of that slope, the results are the same, a huge avalanche, because we have a weak layer, we've got a slab on top of it, and it can go. Once that trigger, once that skier or cornice initiates the fracture, meaning they get failure, that weak layer collapses, and it initiates, the next question is, can it propagate? Can it go far? Can it get some speed? Can it really rip out? And in this instance, the answer was yes. And that's what our stability tests were indicating too, that it can propagate. And so the scary part with propagation like this is that you can be skiing here, taking your safer line right here, and there can be skiers out here. You could have a guy way out here on the edge of the football field, trigger the slide, and it's going to rip all the way over if conditions are right and take you out even though you're half a mile away. So that's the scary part with saddle, is just you're not in control of the situation because there's so many people out there. So that's also a factor when you're deciding whether to go or not. And then there are human factors at play, you know, besides just the snowpack, the familiarity. I mean, let's face it, I mean, if you ski Bridger a lot or you ski saddle a lot, you know the terrain, you know where maybe some weak zones are, you know where the rocks are, you know the area really well. There's a certain amount of herd instinct that we can't get rid of up there, which is, and it's really hard. I mean, I feel it, like if I'm going to go hiking up there and there's 50 people ahead of me that are also going, you're like, well, geez, I mean, we're all out there together. I mean, we know it's not as weak as it was when we had that warning and like one skier would trigger the whole thing. I mean, there's tracks, so it's clearly not that bad, you know, but we can start to just follow other people and not think for ourselves. And then also with the tracks, thinking that tracks indicate stability, which they don't. The question is, when we're standing on top of that slope, we need to ask yourself, what data do I have to ski this? Why is it safe today or not safe? So the Avalanche Center, we are here to help you make that decision. We are here to give you what's called bullseye data. It's data that you can use to make a decision about whether to ski or not ski that slope. And we will discuss in the advisories, you know, how much did it snow? Where did it snow? What were the winds doing? Was there any recent avalanche activity? And are there weak layers in the snowpack? Now on this day, you might say, well, you know, what do those guys know? You know, what did they say that morning, you know, on the advisory that day? Did they answer these questions for us? Well, it just so happened on Tuesday it was my day. You know, I wrote that morning's advisory, and this is what I wrote. I answered some of these questions. I put, we're still feeling the effects of instability from the weekend snowfall. A lot of weight, almost 3 inches of water, 24 plus inches of snow was added in the Bridger Range. Both natural and human-triggered avalanches were rampant. A large natural avalanche near Brackett Creek in the Bridger Range on Saturday broke near the ground 3 to 5 feet deep on facets from early December. On slopes above Truman Gulch, a skier got the new snowed avalanche too. Most slides are breaking under Friday's snowfall on small grain facets, but some slopes are avalanching even deeper. For today, the avalanche danger is rated considerable on all wind-loaded slopes steeper than 35 degrees. And although the winds have been calm the past few days, I'm still concerned with slopes near the ridge lines that got loaded from the weekend's new snow and strong winds. So here we have this data in one hand. We got lots of snow. We got wind loading, you know, making it even more dense. We've got recent big avalanche activity nearby. We have known weak layers. And then over here, we've got other data, which is making it a little more confusing for us. Because I'm seeing tracks all over Saddle and not seeing any avalanches. Maybe you skied it yesterday. Maybe your best friend skied it the day before. Maybe you ski it all the time and you have this personal history. So here you have this data over here, which is not insignificant. I mean, you know, you have a history. But here you have the bullseye data. What you have to remember is the bullseye data always trumps the other stuff. Always. And it gets a little confusing and it's hard to do. You have to take a step back and say, well, you know, tracks don't really mean much. What's really happening? It's like that day, we're saying to ourselves, 3 inches of snow water equivalency fell. We had some winds. We had big recent avalanches. Man, I'm not going out there. I don't care who's going out there or any tracks are. So we help you at least make some basic decisions about what's going on. It's hard when it's sunny, when you're seeing tracks, when it's great skiing, you want to go, but it becomes more the human factor instead of just sticking with the bullseye data. If you stick with the bullseye data, you're not going to go wrong. That's my presentation. Before we go into the full question and answer session, if we could, let's turn up the lights a little. First up, Carl, Mark, Eric, do you have anything to add to this? Nothing. Bridger, Doug Richmond, or Randy, or Jason from Bridger?
Questions if people have.
Anything you'd like to?
Just reiterate the difference between that wind load at the top. I even had it in the forecast. It's not very far down off the top, and it's that whole bulldozer parked there. And it's there a lot of days, more than just the one big day every 4 or 5 years.
Put that safety zone slide back up. Yep.
Just back up.
Oh.
That one right there.
Okay.
I was just going to make the comment, you know, Doug was talking about, are there safe zones on saddle?
First up, this is Carl Birkeland of the National Avalanche Center. He started the Gallatin Center back in, well, forever ago, 1990. So.
And my hair was not quite this gray. But, you know, if you're still telling yourself, yeah, I know it's safe, in these areas, all you really have to do on this picture is look at the vegetation. You know, so like right here, that's probably pretty safe. Right there, that's probably pretty safe. And above this line, you got to ask yourself, how come the trees aren't growing a whole lot thicker? You know? And the reason the trees aren't growing a whole lot thicker is that avalanches have come through here. They don't come through, like Doug said. I mean, they come through a lot more often over here, and they come through a lot more often over here, but they do come through here. And also, as he was talking about the connections, I mean, you know, you saw the picture that Lonnie took where the slide came, took out the football field, took out this side, which always makes me nervous because you think about, you know, that means anybody over here that you have no control over could trigger a slide down on top of you. But I don't doubt that someday, you know, in the past, and a day we'll see again, that a slide can go all the way from the football field, all the way over here, and around the corner to what people call Argentina Bowl. All you need is a continuous weak layer, and one person triggering it in the right spot, and it'll go. You know, so we just have to understand that, you know, the thing can go big. But that doesn't mean that you can't ever go there either, right? Because there are conditions, there are times when things are stable and you can go ski this stuff, all right? I mean, no one's trying to tell anybody, don't go here and ski. But I think what people are worried about is, you know, don't go here and ski after we've just had 3 inches of water 3 or 4 days prior and we have a deeply buried weak layer, because then you're missing that timing part, you know? You want to go out there when the conditions are right. And the conditions are right, you know. It depends on the season. Some seasons the conditions aren't right very often. And this sort of is one of those seasons. But some seasons the conditions are right a lot. You know, so if you have patience, you can hit those right seasons and you can go out there and ski a lot.
Did you?
If you're, most all you are very self-reliant, take responsibility for your own actions and all that. That's going to be a big day for us when it goes from one side clear to the other. I'm probably going to make a little overtime on that day. But to remind you, you've got Bridger Bowl did a spectacular job in the initial response and getting us good information about who was down. We had a good all clear in terms of accountability of who was there and everybody getting out. I mean, a world-class job. And their ski patrol guys, beautiful. Most all of you know the search and rescue guys, all world-class guys because of the community we got here. San Diego has lifeguards. We have search and rescue because that's where we go. We don't go to the beach, we go to saddle.
We're not as tan.
And we run a lot of calls. Nobody runs as many calls. It's a very accomplished group, and the system worked very well. And yeah, you're probably going to be dead right there. But remember, please, in the interest of the searchers, we're coming anyway, because we ain't coming for you. We're coming because of your wife and your kid and your mom. Those are the people we're going to do the rescue for. We're recovering you for them. All right, but we're putting a lot of people at risk. And if you have a chance of surviving, we'll get you, if there was a chance, because it's that good a bunch. Randy's group, wonderful. The Gallatin County Volunteers, wonderful. But keep that in the back of your mind about, we're coming, this is a lot of fun, but is it that fun?
I'd like to open it up to just questions. Don't be shy. Yeah.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I heard firsthand reports in your report tonight that the folks that were up on the ridge after the slide happened formed spontaneous search parties.
Yes.
I just want a big hand for those people.
Yes. Thank you.
One of the other things I think some of those people did is they actually they got organized and set people up so no one else came out on the train, which is awesome, because one of the things that you'd worry about, if a bunch of people just randomly ran down there and you still had a bunch of triggers running around on the ridge that could potentially trigger stuff down on those people, that would be really bad. So they did a great job of doing that too.
Nico, you had a question?
Well, when you're skiing on Saddle Peak, you should, like you're saying, there are no safe zones, but around it, like Argentina Bowl, the Pinnacles, and Bridger Peak, which of those is the most avalanche prone?
Ooh, the most avalanche prone. We probably we hear of human triggered avalanches all throughout there. I think probably Bridger Peak. I see and hear of probably more slides happening on Bridger Peak than just about anywhere. Do you agree? Yeah. Question?
Doug,
yes.
What gave you guys the assurance to dig the pit when you dug the pit time after time?
That's a great question. So, what gave us the assurance that, we were okay being where we were digging the pit? I mean, there we were on the 17th making this video in the middle of that slope. It's a great question. And I got to say, when we were there, we dug the pit, we did our stability test, it popped really clean, and we all looked at each other and we're like, whoa, huh. All right, that's a little more, that's not exactly what I was thinking, but we all agreed that it needed a fair bit more load before it was going to go. And so we did ski, we were skiing in those safer zones as we went down, but we were out there with, there's like 4 of us out there, we dug 2 separate pits, we were confirming how similar the results were, and they were pretty similar. And so, basically what we decided that it needed a lot more snow. It needed inches of water for it to be really unstable. And I think the advisory reflected that, because even when we made that video on the 17th, we were discussing how it's going to be a future problem once it gets enough load. So it's one of those, the weak layer's there. How much is it going to take to get it to go? In this case, it took about 5 inches of water.
So would it have been some time before you would have gone back there after the 3 inches of water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Another question. Yes.
How many miles per hour do you anticipate that avalanche is going?
Boy.
I mean, how?
I'm guessing 100, 80, 100, 60 to 80.
Maybe 100.
Yeah, fast. Yep, they move quick. Yeah.
Was there a major concern that right after the slide had gone, that the football field had been further weakened and that was then prone to go?
Yeah, so the question is, are we concerned after saddle when only half of it is the other half? It might be extra sensitive to going, and the answer is yes. We were very concerned, because what we find is that when avalanches happen, a lot of times the slopes adjacent to them, or if maybe the whole thing didn't go, pieces of them are right on the brink. They've been weakened. And so we were really concerned about that, and that's why during the search phase, and we were sweeping the debris with the dogs and the beacons, we decided that we should probably not hang out here for much longer, and then we pulled back. And a few days after that avalanche, people were skiing the football field. They were going for it. The weak layer is still there, and it was a concern. Yeah.
Actually, just a few seconds after the dust cloud settled, they were skiing.
So everyone catch that? A few seconds after the dust settled, people were going for it on the football field. So. What? Yeah, I got work. Yeah. So a thing to remember is that recent avalanche activity is the #1 sign that the slopes are unstable. You don't have to dig a snow pit on the football field after Saddle Peak goes, because we know it's unstable, because adjacent slopes have a similar snowpack. Yes?
I've got 2 questions.
Yeah.
My first question is, what happens to that weak layer over the springtime? Like, how does it break down? And my other question is there any effort to map avalanche paths, like say in the bridgers? Or?
So the first question is, what happens to this weak layer as time goes on, especially in the spring? Great question. As time goes on, that weak layer gets stronger. Okay, it starts to bond. It's going to take more stress to get it to go. That's why, on February 16th, it took 3 inches of water. I mean, if we got maybe on January 16th, it might have only taken 1.5 inches of water. I mean, so it does get stronger with time. As spring happens, spring's a different beast, because now we're talking about some wet snow activity, and it can percolate down, and those faceted layers, it definitely can break on those because they're inherently weaker. So it's still a concern, but over time things do get stronger. It just is taking a long time. Remember, it formed the beginning of December. It's still March 5th now, or 4th, and we're still talking about it. Now the second part is, there been an effort to map things? The answer is no, there hasn't. Well, I don't know, Carl, has there been a real effort to map things?
I had a graduate student a while back, and they mapped a bunch of the starting zones in the bridgers, but it's really pretty straightforward. If you see tree damage, if the slope angle is steeper than 30 degrees, if it's covered with snow, it's avalanche terrain. And so here, if you were mapping this, you just go, well, clearly all that's avalanche terrain. I mean, it would go, really, your map would go like this. It would go right to the bottom of this, and to the bottom of this, and then it would come down and go to the bottom of all of this. And so essentially, almost everything that you see here, avalanche terrain. So, and most of the stuff in the bridgers is avalanche terrain, and it gets skied. So we know that if your timing's right, you can go and ski it. Or if you're inside the ski area, where the ski patrol's taking care of the avalanche problem by always making sure they got skiers on it and using explosives and stuff, then you're there, of course.
Nico?
I have 2 questions. When you're skiing out on Saddle Peak, is it smart? Should you wait and ski on a spot that's like the safer zones on Saddle Peak? So you really shouldn't ski on the hang fire or below it. So should you stick to those safer zones?
Yeah. So this question, should you stick to the safer zones, and what about the hang fire? Hang fire is the piece of snow that's still left, after the avalanche. And the hang fire certainly is an issue. Immediately after an avalanche, we are concerned with hang fire coming down, because it's also been incredibly weakened. As a general rule, I try and ski the safer zones, just because I know that I'm not always right. I try and be right all the time, but I know I make mistakes, and I think something's stable and maybe it's not, So I kind of stack the deck in my favor by at least skiing safer zones. And part of that is also skiing one at a time. Now on a peak like Saddle, that becomes problematic when there's a lot of other people around.
Yeah,
a lot of people. Yes?
There was a question about the speed of an avalanche. Years ago at Teton passed, they decided to build an avalanche-proof bridge over Glory Bowl, and they factored in the weight of the snow if there were an avalanche. But when the bridge was about finished, Glory Bowl slid and ripped out the bridge, and what they didn't factor into was the power from the winds that accompanied the avalanche.
Yeah, the powder blast from an avalanche can be quite impressive and can snap off trees as well. So yeah, it's not just the weight or the the actual snow, but the powder blast itself. Yes.
Is the search and rescue bird equipped with Reco?
The question is search and rescue equipped with Reco? The answer is?
The bird, no. We have to contract with helicopters. We don't own them.
Right. But the Reco, but Bridger Bowl has the Reco. And we actually, when I went out, there onto the debris, we did have one of the newer Recos to find. But once again, if you're searching with the Reco, especially in a slide that big, it's probably going to be a body recovery. A Reco is, and in a lot of clothing you'll see they'll even say like Reco, and it's a little chip. It's a little chip that's a reflector actually, that's in your clothing. And what there's a device about the size of a small laptop that you hold, and it sends out a signal to that reflector, and it bounces back and says, oh, there's someone with a Reco chip on them. And so so you don't have to, it's nowhere near as effective as having an avalanche transceiver where your partner is going to find you. But if you're in a ski area and you have a piece of clothing with a Reco chip in it and you get buried, the ski patrol or search and rescue will come out and at least sweep the debris with that to see if, we're just searching, we're just trying the best we can in any way we can. So a lot of boots and jackets have Reco chips. Yes?
Why do you think the football field hasn't gone yet?
So why do I think the football field hasn't gone yet? We were actually talking about that today. We were trying to decide, well, why? And I think, once again, we're just guessing here to a certain extent, but this rib right here, there was some, I think when the weak layer was formed, there were some winds that came that did not either it blew away the weak layer, didn't allow it to form, or this wind slab wasn't laid evenly over. But something along here, probably with the weak layer, was missing, so they weren't connected. So it went until it just stopped. But I have a feeling, I have a really good feeling, that on the other side of this snowpack is going to be the same as this over here. They just weren't connected. Yes?
Is it possible in the future that the ski area would expand its boundary and being able to control it?
So the question was, is there a chance that the ski area is going to expand and do some control work on Saddle Peak? Randy? Yeah. with Randy Elliott, Randy Elliott's the general manager at Bridger Bowl.
For us to expand any further south than we are now, it would require another permit from the Forest Service. We'd have to do another EIS, and that takes years to do. If we did take it on, it'd take a lot of money and effort on Bridger Bowl's part, obviously, to try and make an impact on this huge slide path, where even a small slide, we've been looking at big slides, but even a small slide out in any part of that area boosts you right over a cliff. And you could be dead in a small slide. It doesn't have to be a big slide that pushes you over the cliff. So it'd be very risky for the area to take it on. That's kind of why we stopped where it is. It's a little more manageable for us to take that on, and small mistakes from errors in small wind slabs don't just boost you over a 120-foot cliff.
Yeah.
Can you point out exactly where it is controlled and where isn't?
Sure.
That's the pointer right there.
It's well marked if you the red button.
Yeah.
It's well marked, but we basically go right here. It's called the bitter end. It kind of follows this tree line down, right like that. And the idea is we take care of everything to the north of that line. There's a whole bunch of signs on the top, a bunch of pie plates running all the way down here. And you guys know that if you've ridden south the Schlushman's chair, there's all kinds of signs spelling out what happens to you if you go outside the boundaries. You're on your own, you're making the call for yourself, and the rescue is by the county. We help out with the county because a lot of us are part of search and rescue, but you really, really need to be confident in your ability to evaluate avalanche hazard and have the ability to travel safely in avalanche terrain. And like Carl says, there's a lot of time when you can ski this pretty comfortably, but there's a lot of time when you're really sticking your neck out there too. And there's been a lot of parents and dragging their kids up there and people dragging their friends up there. And you just really want to be aware of what can happen to you if you make that bad judgment call, or if you make a small mistake, the consequences are huge. And we were really, really lucky to have a great example of what could happen to you without anybody being in it. And hopefully that was a good wake-up call for everybody, and to treat this with a lot more respect than we've been seeing. That's really what it needs, is a lot more respect for what can happen out there. And it goes the same for north of the area. We're open boundaries on all the ridge terrain now. And so you go up there and you've read all the language that tells you you're on your own. When you go out there, you really are on your own, and you have the Forest Service giving you some good input on what you might see. But you really have to know what you're doing if you really want to have a realistic chance of coming home to your family and friends.
I'll just make one comment to follow up on Randy's comment, which is, there's this line, you kind of look at it and you go, oh, well, there's just this line on the map, and I've had people ask me, well, how different are the conditions over here than the conditions over here? And it's really different. When you have a group of professionals that are going out, they're throwing explosives, they're evaluating the snowpack, and they're taking, they're taking that decision for you. When they open those boundaries, when they open their lift, they're saying, okay, you can go out here and you can travel in this terrain safely. And you look at the avalanche records around the western U.S. for the last 50 years, and there's a small handful of people that have died in avalanches inside of ski areas. And every year, we have 30 people that die outside of ski areas in the backcountry. So it's a huge difference when you cross that line. And people really need to recognize that, that once you cross that line, it's just a completely different world.
And I'll expand on that real quick. As we saw in the video earlier, the guy who snowboarded off the peak there, and his partner dropped in first, and he immediately lost sight of him and lost contact with him, and he's down there, and he sees the avalanche go by, and he's yelling for his first friend. He has no idea where his partner is, and partner rescue is really your best chance of survival. If you're caught in an avalanche in the backcountry, if you're buried for 15 minutes or less, you're going to have roughly a 90% chance of survival if your partner can find you. And with an avalanche of this size, it's a little different because you're probably not going to survive that. In a smaller scale, buried less than 15 minutes, you have a 90% chance of survival if your partner can get to you and effectively get you out of your hole. So it's, I think that's a huge part of this backcountry access point here, and letting everybody get to the top saddle really easily is people they lose focus on taking care of themselves and taking care of their partners. And so really paying attention. And you saw in the video, the guy looked at his locator, he had to turn it around to figure out how to turn the thing to receive, and that is not a good idea. You're in the wrong place if that's how you're operating. So being really proficient with your gear, being comfortable with your partners, and really having a backcountry routine down is really important. And I think that gets lost up here in the segment.
Should we one more or one or two?
So maybe a question for Randy. So what would have happened had there been fatalities, and how would Bridger's policies, would things still be the same? Would there still be a gate up there? Would you change things? Would they be exactly the same as they are now?
Well, when we changed the policy several years ago, we started, you know, with low gates. There was a gate low north and south that people, that before that period, the boundaries were just closed, but people were still, everybody here knows, people were streaming out and going there, just ducking the rope and going out of bounds. When we changed the policy at that time, and then when we built slushmans and opened the rest of the terrain, we knew going in that we probably increased the chances that somebody's going to die out of bounds. And just like it happened in Jackson Hole, when they opened their boundaries, they pretty much told the county that we expect 2 people to die every year. And I expected that may happen to us too, and that was talked about with the Forest Service, with my board of directors. Everybody knew that with freedom, you're out there and the risks are greater. So to answer your questions, what would have happened? I suppose it depends to some extent on how many people died. If 1 or 2 died, we'd obviously review it. We'd all look at it and we'd say, okay, we kind of expected this. Is there any way we could have prevented it? Was there any more effort we could have made at education or somehow try to change people's, the way they were using that terrain? We would have reviewed it. Whether it would have changed or not, I don't know. Until that day happens and we all review it again. After this happened, talked with Carl, I talked with several people in the Forest Service, talked with our board of directors, and we all felt at this time that it makes sense to keep going the way we are. All we get is huge compliments on opening the boundaries right now. And there's a lot of people that really appreciate that freedom. Whether people are going to, if people start dying out there, if the public opinion is going to be more that, well, we got to shut it back down, we got to build big fences around it, and we got to make it so this is a little amusement park and we don't let people go in the backcountry. I don't think that's the way it'll go, because that's not the way it's gone at other places where the boundaries are open and people have died.
Doug?
Just to add to that, I want the ski patrol Bridger work with Randy a lot, and part of that whole impact has to do with the National Forest Service guidance policy, which says that permit people like Bridger Bowl shouldn't be allowed to keep you from public lands beyond their boundaries, beyond those permit boundaries. And so we're going a little bit on that. So the perspective for that, somebody dies at Bridger, well, somebody almost died at Aspen last week. This stuff happens all over Utah, Jackson Hole, and elsewhere. We don't want it to happen to our folks. We got some special luck that happens at Bridger Bowl, and we sure tapped into it on this one.
Should we do one more question? Are we done? All right, well, yeah.
How high winds can the helicopter fly in?
How high winds can the helicopter fly in?
Depends on
the pilot.
How turbulent it is. If it's just steady winds, they can do a lot, but if it's a lot of turbulence, then that shuts them down.
And there's a lot of turbulence on that side. It comes over, and every time we're in there, whether we're doing the sack snowboarders every spring or whatever, it's hard on us.
Yes. We'll do a few more. Go ahead.
How far did the helicopter have to come from?
The helicopter came from Gallatin Field, the airport right here.
Oh, it's not the. Does the medical helicopter get involved ever?
Only if Randy's one of our lead helicopter rescue guys with the county, so he's got all the knowledge. But medical helicopters are not very good rescue helicopters. They're very good if you need a nurse and a paramedic and slacks, and you need a paramedic unit. But they're not really designed to be flying in this stuff, landing in unapproved landing zones, that sort of thing. We use Duffy with Central Helicopters and Mike Karish exclusively, unless we have to do the military when they're not available.
God, I guess we'll keep going. Yeah.
That weak layer of snow has been with us since before the ski hall opened. Was there ever a time this year where you would have felt comfortable skiing up, knowing what that weak layer was like?
So the question was, knowing that the weak layer was formed early, even before the ski area was open, was there ever a time when I felt like it was safe to go ski? And the answer was, well, yeah. And that was back in December when I did ski it a few times because I knew the weak layer was there, but it didn't have the load yet, and so we were just bracing ourselves for that. And then one more.
Is search and rescue responsible for putting the entire bill, and if so, how is search and rescue funded, and how is your budget typically set for any given year?
Okay, so it's a search and rescue budget. How do they make their money and pay for it?
What's the answer? We need more.
But people are not charged. They are not charged. And
I'll give you the quickie. We ran 110 calls last year. We averaged $200 a call. Okay, it's funded by 2 mills on your general taxes from the county. It's also reimbursed to a degree out of the state through ATV and snowmobile registrations, hunting, trapping, and fishing licenses. So there's a couple different mechanisms. But just like the lifeguards in LA, we kind of have, that's our work here. Does that answer your question? Depends on which ship we get. Anywhere from $700 an hour to about $1,600 an hour.
Right.
But when you average it all out, it's because of the people we got all volunteer at the time. It's like the best deal going.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. This was great. And if you do get out in the backcountry, please give us information. Let us know what you find. We use it, things like this. And myself, Mark Staples, Eric Knopf, Carl, Bridger folks will be around for a little bit. If you have any questions that didn't get answered, come and find us. Thank you.
That was my question. Good work, man.
Hey, you too, man. Glad you were here. Right on, dude. You too, man. That was sweet. Hey, good job. Glad you were here. That was awesome. Nice, good job. That was a good turnout. How many, you think? Yeah.